Nan Simonson, and I'm delighted you're here because I have an interview I'm very excited about. I want to introduce myself. First, I am Nan Simonson, and I am the author of Aging Powerfully. When I was about to turn 70, a little more than 3 years ago, I was looking at, well, 70 is kind of like the black hole. Isn't that where things start falling apart and you get sucked into it? And then I thought, absolutely not. The blue zones and Dan Buettner have shown that that is not the case. I had been working with a lifestyle medical practice, seeing remarkable turnaround and, more importantly, the prevention of chronic diseases by the choices that we make in lifestyle. And so I thought, okay, this is the time to look at it as the beginning of the next 1, 2, or 3 decades of life. And that's the way I look at it. And so I'm very excited about what's yet to come as I aim toward 100. That's wood. Anyway, so today I'm going to be talking to Rachael Brown, who wrote What the Fork? And she'll tell more about that title and her implication with the word fork and the reason she chose that. And interestingly enough, Amazon's thoughts about it. I self-published as well and went initially with Amazon and still am. And so, yeah, they have things to say in certain things. Anyway, so I'm going to ask her to tell you about a few things that I heard her say in various interviews. One of them is how she converted from sad to happy. What does she mean by sad to happy? In what context? She'll tell you. And then I'll let you know that she's been whole food plant-based for going on 15 years. That's a long time. I am going on 6 years, and there was so much for me to learn at the push of a button on my phone or my computer. Think about 14 years ago. That was not the case. The foods that were available weren't as prevalent. Now, it was probably easier not to be pulled in by advertising saying this is vegan, so eat it, meaning this is junk food, no animal, eat it. And we have to kind of watch that, but she'll mention what that's about. But she had a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old at the time, a 6-year-old boy, 8-year-old girl, and she said, we're going vegan. And it worked out, and it worked out beautifully. And those kids are now in college, and guess what they eat? Whole food, plant-based, yay. And I made notes, and she's going to tell you what she did with her family, sort of a bonding exercise I simply love. And that was at the gathering time that all families could and should have, and that's around the dinner table, that's around a meal table. She would play the game. Well, it wasn't even a game. It was just a chance for everyone to share a hi, a low, and a what the heck. What the heck? I can't wait for her to tell you about this. She is a super person. She's going to tell you a little more about her story, and she's going to tell you about her book and show it to you. And Rachael, take it away. And I'm going to go, I'll tell you what, she is also going to do a demonstration. Her book is not a cookbook, but she has recipes in it. My book is not a cookbook, but I have no recipes in it. I should. She has recipes, and she's going to show you a couple to make a point. And that's the other thing I would like you to do, Rachael. Boy, are you going to have to talk faster. We'll just go over. No, there is no over. We can go as long as we want. The 10-day program, what that's about. I love the concept of a 10-day proof in the pudding program that she has put together. So she'll talk to you about that as well. So go ahead, Rachael. Tell them more about yourself.
Thanks so much for having me, Nan. This is my book, For Fork's Sake, a quick guide to healing yourself and the planet through a plant-based diet, which is very appropriate for today since it's Earth Day. Happy Earth Day, all. Did you know that the #1 thing you can do statistically to help the planet is to change what you're eating, to eat a whole food plant-based diet? And there are many reasons for that. But yeah, I wrote this book, and yes, before I forget, Amazon wouldn't allow me to run advertisements because the title For Fork's Sake. And I thought that was a little crazy because of all the other things you can find on Amazon, but you can find my book elsewhere as well. So Barnes & Noble, if you'd rather. I did go plant-based over 14 years ago now. I came upon it not because I was really looking for it, although I did have high cholesterol in my 20s, and that was somewhat concerning. But like most people in their 20s, they don't tend to worry so much about high cholesterol. When I was told I had high cholesterol, I just said, what else can I do? I don't want to take medication, because my dad was on cholesterol medication, always had been that I could remember. And he would have these odd side effects like losing his taste or something else. And so he'd change medications, and I just didn't want to go down that road. So my doctor said, well, you could cut back on eggs and cheese and exercise some more. And I exercise all the time. I was a high school athlete. In college, I ran and played intramural soccer and hiked, rock climbed, cycled. So I didn't think that exercise was really the thing that was, having an ill effect on me. So I would cut back on eggs and cheese, and my numbers would lower a little, but they would eventually creep back up. But like any 20-year-old, I mostly kind of ignored it. I, tried to cut out the cheese and just went on with life. But then in my early mid-30s, my nephew, who was 5 years old, was diagnosed with cancer, and his mom was in nursing school at the time. And she had a professor who asked her if she'd looked at the role of nutrition in cancer. Now, they had like a small hobby farm. They had lots of animals, lots of chickens. They, killed a lot of their animals to eat. She had taught me how to pull mozzarella cheese the summer before, and I love cheese. We had 13 chickens at the time. My daughter had a little organic egg business that she sold to neighbors and friends. And so, we were eating what we thought was healthy, like grass-fed beef. We bought it once a week at the farmer's market because we thought that was the right thing to do for the planet and for our health. But when my sister-in-law had this professor ask her about the role of nutrition in cancer, that professor suggested she read a book called The China Study, T. Colin Campbell's work, and asked her to watch the movie Forks Over Knives. And my sister-in-law did, and they changed their diet overnight. And she said, you've got to look into this. So I read The China Study, and my initial reaction at the end of it was I was really mad. I could not believe no doctor had told me in uncertain terms that if I just changed, not just cut back on a few eggs and cut back on a little cheese, but fundamentally changed what I was eating, this wouldn't be an issue. And so we watched Forks Over Knives, and, our whole family watched it. Our kids were 6 and 8, but we watched it and we were convinced, really. And so I said to my husband, okay, should we give it a try? Like, let's do, I got online, and like you said, 14 years ago, there wasn't as much online. It wasn't vegan was not as popular of a term. Nobody had heard of plant-based, but I did find Dr. John McDougall, who at that time was just up the road. They had a live-in program that you could do for 12 days, but it was really expensive. And I had these 2 small kids and was working. And so they very generously, and they still have this all online for free. So you can go in and look at their program, which is really get your blood work done, eat whole food, plant-based, no oil meals for 12 days, and get your blood work done again. And they have videos and resources online. And so we decided to do it. So we got our blood work. We ate whole food, plant-based, no oil. I couldn't get back in till day 17. But when I went to see my doctor with my lab results, he said, what did you do? And whatever you're doing, keep doing it, because your cholesterol dropped 50 points. And I couldn't do that with medication. So this was both, I like to say, good news and bad news, because it was wonderful news that, medication was no longer necessary and wouldn't be. But also it was kind of bad news because, our kids were used to pizza parties for, school events or sporting events, and they loved macaroni and cheese and all the standard American diet or sad diet things. So this really was the beginning of our journey of taking our whole family to whole food plant-based. Now, it made it a little bit easier. My husband and daughter are both lactose intolerant. So we had been experimenting with, lactate kind of products and stuff. But it really helped their systems to immediately cut out all dairy. And so, yeah, we made a lot of mistakes in the beginning, which is why I wrote the book, because I kept trying to give people the China study, which was the book that changed it all for me. But all my friends who had young kids, would kind of sheepishly hand it back and be like, it's too much of a read. It's a thick book, there's a lot of science or whatever. And so I wanted to come up with something that was really short and sweet, that really gave the why do we need to eat whole food, plant-based, no oil for our health? And then, okay, if we know that for our health and for the planet's health, then how do we actually go about this in a sustainable way? And, the word diet is in there. That's like it's a plant-based diet, but I don't consider it a diet. I consider it a lifestyle, because a diet is something that you go off of eventually. And we all know that diets don't tend to work. They work for a short period of time, but a lifestyle is changing fundamentally how you do things. And that's what we set out to do. But we made a lot of mistakes along the way. We were very black and white, and we tried to figure out, how do we make this work with young kids? And we wanted to keep our friends, because we were trying to tell everybody about this. And we soon realized we wanted to have some friends left. We didn't want to be evangelists to the point where nobody wanted to be around us or share a meal with us. So yes, I came up with a 10-day plan so that everybody can do what we did and really experience the benefits. And when you get your blood work done, you really can see the differences. So, in 10 days, a lot can happen. Actually, in 24 hours to 48 hours, a lot can happen. I had to put a medical disclaimer at the beginning of the book, because if you are on, let's say, blood pressure medication, or you take insulin, you might need to start demedicating, like going off your medication, in as little as 24 to 48 hours. So if you're on medication, you should definitely check with your doctor, let them know you're going to do this. But that's how quickly our bodies can respond to giving our bodies what they really need to run on. During that time, I had no idea my cholesterol was dropping, because you can't feel your cholesterol dropping. Now, I felt wonderful. I had amazing energy like I'd had in my 20s. I was sleeping really well. Our skin was really clear. We felt fantastic. All these things were happening. But it wasn't until we got our blood work back that we could really point to these markers that our bodies were really healing themselves. And in such a short period of time. So my son and I, he had high cholesterol also at age 10, we found out, and we'd been eating like this for 2 years. Now, he loved avocados and peanut butter, which are higher fat foods, as did I. And we realized, our doctor said, your cholesterol has dropped, but it hasn't dropped as much as would be normal. And so we actually did the testing for the APOE gene, commonly known as the Alzheimer's gene, because my grandfather had Alzheimer's, my dad now has Alzheimer's, and I carry the gene, and my son carries the gene as well. So that made some sense as to why our bodies weren't breaking down the fat and the cholesterol as much, and our bodies overproduce cholesterol. So it just was another impetus to be making healthy choices. And for my son, we had to do a really strict, to make sure he didn't need to be on medication, a really strict elimination of fat for a time, just to see if that would really make a change. And in 9 weeks, he lost 10% of his body weight. It was crazy. He was never hungry, because we were eating all kinds of starch-based foods and all kinds of delicious foods. But we just had eliminated those higher fat whole food categories, and he had such a significant change. So not everybody has to do that. Many people can eat lots of seeds and nuts every day and have no issue. So sadly, I'm not one of those people. So I have things like defatted peanut butter powder that we use to make a peanut sauce. But yeah, now my kids are 20 and 22. They are away at college. I'm in California. My daughter's up in Washington State, senior in college. My son is in Colorado and at college, CSU, he's a sophomore, and both of them eat whole food, plant-based, no oil. I would say the hardest thing is the no oil bit, but I mean, they learned growing up here. And what I talk about in the book is if you can keep your house a really clean eating environment, that is a huge help. If it's not in your house, it's not in your mouth, as Chef AJ famously quotes, which is so true. So we don't have any oils here. We don't have animal products. We don't have junk vegan food. We don't have those things, so that when you eat at home, you're eating really good food. Now, we do have some nuts and seeds and all that good stuff. But when we eat at home, we know we're eating a whole food, plant-based, no oil diet. I talk about eating out because that is a normal part of life as well. And we find that to be more difficult. You can find vegan meals at almost any restaurant these days. Even steakhouses, you can actually get a really good meal at a steakhouse because you can get a baked potato with no butter or sour cream, hold the bacon bits and all that stuff, and just get a bunch of sides, and you have a fantastic meal. But usually when you eat out, it's we just assume that we're going to have oil because most restaurants don't know how to cook without oil, and they think you're crazy when you ask them to cook without oil. Some will try it and some will do it. I talk about a chef that I worked with, and he has a little card that he carries. And when he goes to restaurants, he gives them, he was a chef himself. And he says, can you give this to the chef? And it says, I'm fighting heart disease. I can't have oil. I can't have animal products. Will you please just, instead of oil, saute with water or whatever? And he said, oftentimes the chefs are very excited to do something differently and help somebody when they're asked in a nice way. So I talk about, the real world stuff because, mostly people were concerned when we went to eating this way that it was going to be too expensive. It was going to take too much time. And both those things couldn't really be farther than the truth. I mean, you save money eating this way. When you think about what you're taking out of your grocery cart, when you take out meat and dairy, cheese, milk, half and half, ice cream, and then you remove the oils, all those really expensive olive oils or other oils. All of a sudden you have a really empty grocery cart, and you can fill that with whole beans and nuts and seeds and grains and even things like macadamia nuts that are expensive. You'll still come out way ahead because you're not spending money on these expensive foods or food-like products. So it doesn't take a lot of extra time. In fact, I put a few recipes in there just to get people going. And one of them I'll demo today. You'll see it. It's like, it takes no time. I love Jeff Novick. He's a registered dietitian. He actually worked for Kraft Foods back in the day. And when his daughter was 8 years old, he came up with a soup that an 8-year-old could make. He was a single parent. And so he came up with a recipe that she could make when she got home before he did. And all you needed was a pair of scissors and a can opener and a big pot. And I just love it because it really is such an easy thing. And it reminds people that you don't have to be making super fancy dinners every night or for lunch. Sure, it's really fun to make like a lasagna. We'll make for guests. We were talking about Chef AJ's disappearing lasagna. That's our favorite. I have the link on my website. We'll make that for parties or for gatherings or something that's more time consuming, but you can make very simple foods very easily, and it's not going to take a lot of money, and it's not going to take a lot of time. So, learning how to batch cook a few things, which I advocate for the beginning of the week or whenever you have time, cooking up a whole bunch of whatever starch it is that you love, whether it's brown rice, pasta. People a lot of times come from low carb days and they're scared to eat carbohydrates, but we're not talking about, donuts and white bagels. We're talking about whole grain kind of starches. So complex carbohydrates that are going to take a while in our bodies to break down with all that fiber. It's going to regulate our insulin, and they're helpfully going to keep us full and satiated. So I don't know if you've ever had the experience of having, soup and salad for lunch. And if it's like a vegetable broth soup and there's, not much in it, then an hour later you can be hungry if you didn't have, some starch in your meal. So it can be really helpful to add in these complex carbohydrates. But cook up whatever you want, a big batch of pasta, a big batch of brown rice or quinoa, potatoes, and you'll have those in your fridge and you can pull off of them all week long. You can use them as a snack. You can add them to meals. It just makes life really easy. So I would argue you don't spend any more time cooking this way than you do a standard American diet. And the sad to happy thing was, we eat whole food, plant-based, no oil. And that acronym is like WFPNO or something. It just doesn't roll off the tongue. And so came up with happy as a way to go from SAD, the standard American diet, to happy. And happy stands for healthy and plant-powered. Yay. So that's our acronym for remembering. So the other recipe I have is my happy peanut butter balls. And so it just is also makes me grin and chuckle every time I think of a food being happy rather than sad. One of the things that you mentioned too, I have a chapter. I really thought I was writing this book for young parents like me. It's the book that I wish I would have had at the stage when we started, but really it's actually caught on with people who are early retirees or in their 50s or older who are maybe having health problems, starting to have health problems, or wanting to avoid health problems. But I wrote about what we did with the kids, and is this applicable for anybody with young people in their lives or grandkids? But there were some games and some tricks kind of to employ to keep kids at the table and want them or get them to want to eat whole food plant-based meals. One of the really basic ones is I just say to ask your kids what their favorite foods are. And this goes for anybody in your family. If you're the cook in your family, just ask, what are your 3 favorite meals? And, so for my kids, it was like macaroni and cheese and enchiladas, chicken enchiladas. And maybe it was pizza, the third one, but we had a long list. And I just suggest finding, you can buy cookbooks if you want, go to the library, check them out if you want, or just Google whole food, plant-based, no oil, macaroni and cheese, or vegan, no oil enchiladas. And you will have thousands upon thousands of recipes pop up. And just look through a few, pick one that sounds good and start with that. You don't have to make a big announcement that, hey guys, we're having a vegan macaroni and cheese bake. You can just say, I found a new recipe for macaroni and cheese and I want to see if you like it. And if they don't, try another one and then solicit their advice. Really helps to have them cooking in the kitchen with you, or at the very least picking out things at the grocery store. And there's some good tips to, and tricks to employ there too. Just making sure there's not a no answer, but there's an option answer. So, instead of saying, would you like to pick out a vegetable to take in your lunch this week? They might say no. So you can say, would you like to pick cucumbers or carrots this week, or which green vegetable would you like to pick, so just some rephrasing, rethinking of things. And the game that you were alluding to at the table, which was a favorite and still is really when we get together, the high, low, what the heck. We actually had family friends and they played this at their house every night. And it was just a wonderful way to gather around the dinner table and everybody got to share what their high, low, and what the heck moment was in the day. And just having some of those things, there's another, the key jar that had key questions. A kid could pull one out and they'd be very excited. They got to pick one and they'd read it and come up with their answer. And then everybody would, answer. And then the next person got to pick one. But doing that taught them how to stay at the table, how to have conversation, and how to engage in conversation. If you're hungry because it's dinner time and you were playing a sport or you were playing outside, not sitting in front of the TV with, string cheese and goldfish or something, but, you were active or you were help preparing the meal, and you're talking, then you're naturally going to eat what's in front of you, even if it's maybe not your favorite food, but you're probably going to want to eat if you're hungry. So just some of these, tips and tricks that really helped with us. And I find people are usually concerned about their kids, that it's going to be really difficult for their kids to transition to whole food plant-based. But I found it to actually be the opposite. Really, adults have a harder time because I think we have so much more time in with offending foods that we have emotional ties to them. We have holiday ties to some of these foods. But for kids, once they learn about factory farming and, go with age appropriate things, videos or stories or whatever, but kids have a hard time once they learn about the connection, of what they're eating. They have a really hard time disconnecting that, where adults can somehow set it aside a lot easier. So some of these things were just really helpful, and I give people the tips to try it out for themselves. And I do suggest that 10-day try. And 10 days is for a few reasons. I mean, mainly it's forming new habits, but also I learned in doing research for the book, every 2 weeks, all of us have new taste buds. So our taste buds are always evolving, changing. So if you take out those hyper palatable foods for 2 weeks, 10 days, 10 to 14 days, you have new taste buds that you're working with. So that can be a fantastic thing when you're trying to cut out some certain food groups or different foods. And my son had the experience of having a red pepper, and he was like, "Where did you get this red pepper? It's so sweet." And I was racking my brain trying to come up with where did I get this red pepper? But it was during that 9 weeks when he had to give up all, fat. And that was mainly, sugar. We don't really use sugar. We use date syrup and some brown sugar, but, he wasn't having those foods that are so hyper palatable, and he had a red pepper, and it just tasted so good and so sweet, which it really does once you stop eating hyper palatable foods. So, many people find this to be true. Ripe peaches now will blow your mind in the summer. They're so good. Fresh strawberries, same thing. They're like candy. And, in the beginning, the kids wanted some of those old favorite foods. We didn't restrict, like if they went to a birthday party or went to somebody's house, we never said you have to take your own food, you can't have it. We just did this at our home and let them make choices. And we learned that by trial and error, because we tried to be very black and white at the beginning, and that didn't work so well. There's some stories in the book about that. But, a funny thing happened after a few months. It was like, if we went out with people and my kids would order, cheese pizza, all of a sudden they'd have stomach aches afterwards, and it didn't taste as good as they remembered. They really wanted to have Kraft macaroni and cheese, and they went to a friend's house and had it, and they were like, it didn't taste good. I like our macaroni and cheese better. So many people, once they get enough distance from the hyper palatable foods, and by that, I mean high fat, high sugar, high salt foods, and usually they're together so that fireworks are going off in our brains. Once we get some distance from those, your taste buds change, and you find yourself loving real whole foods as they are, like they come from the ground. So it's been a fantastic experience. And yes, now they're 20 and 22, and they are away at college cooking this way for themselves, which is incredible to me. I wasn't sure that they would always choose this, but we get pictures from them both, and I'm sometimes envious of what they're having for dinner. So yeah, I think I answered all your questions, Nan. Did I miss any?
No, you nailed it. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'm so used to doing a Zoom call and not, it's been a while since I've done anything live, and I was completely ignoring the chat, just sort of forgot it existed. And so Nancy, hi, and hi, Nan and Rachel. This will be fantastic information, no doubt. Yes, it is. Since both of you are long-term whole food plant-based, how do you handle travel? Ooh, that's a good one. I'm going to be going to Tahiti pretty soon in a few weeks.
Yeah.
And it's French Polynesian islands, so I've already Googled the restaurants. It's French. It's French with roux and butter and all, but they've got a community that I've discovered. I want to go on a European garden tour, and the tour leaders are not too positive on accommodations. Okay, I'll let Rachel talk about that. So, okay, take it away.
Yeah, we actually spent a little over 2 weeks last year in France. We did a cycling trip, and then we were in Paris. And like you, I looked ahead, and there are a lot of vegan restaurants in Paris. That was fantastic. We didn't even have time to go to them all. They were so amazing. And we thought for sure that once we got outside of the city, everything we'd heard was it will be very difficult to eat plant-based. And we were in Avignon, and then we were kind of outside of that area, in small towns, and we actually had no problem eating whole food plant-based. Now, there would be oil like there is here in going out to a restaurant, but even at a bakery where you could only get like a little sandwich that usually was ham and cheese and maybe some vegetables, we would just get one with vegetables and ask for no fromage. So we, had packed bars and got some nuts and fruit and stuff at the store, thinking we might be surviving on that. But we actually found it to not be a problem at all, which was really surprising. We were with friends outside of Avignon, and we had driven to see a castle, and we stopped in this tiny town at a restaurant, and there was nothing vegan on the menu. And so we just asked, I don't remember what the meal was. It was something with risotto, I think. And we just said, could we just get it with no cheese, no animal products? And when they brought our meals, I just actually saw it on my phone the other day. It was this beautiful work of art. I mean, it was French, right? It had breadsticks like sticking up, and it was gorgeous. And our friends who are not whole food plant-based, they're Swiss, they said, oh, we should have ordered your meal. So there the chefs were having fun, seeing what they could do with just plants for a meal. And we found it to be really wonderful. So, I know that's not always the case, but I think some people travel, I know they carry a little tiny Instapot and will cook things in their own hotel room. And we don't go to that extreme. If anything, we'll eat a lot of fruit. You can usually always find oatmeal or a grain for breakfast. But I think part of traveling is enjoying the local culture, and that often is food. But usually there's some workarounds, I feel like, wherever we've been. We've spent the Christmas, my daughter was studying in Spain the first part of this year. So we did Christmas in Spain. And there too, there was a lot of oil on the papas bravas, on the potatoes with cheese sauce, but we just get it with no cheese. And so we ate a lot of potatoes, and we ate a lot of other foods. But yeah, it wasn't as hard as maybe, depending on where you're going, I guess, but it can be doable for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. My husband and I in these last 6 years I don't know how many countries we've gotten to, maybe 10. And we just find what we want, because whole food that is plant-based is what most things begin with. And we just ask for a deconstructed. So you should be just fine. And so tell them what you're going to make. Tell them about this soup. I loved that story about Jeff Novick as a single parent with an 8-year-old, giving her something she could do, because if she could do it, we could do it. Take it away.
Exactly. Yeah. So this soup he calls it longevity soup. And it does, like you mentioned, the blue zones. I mean, even thinking about traveling, most places around the world, when you think of it, they subsisted mainly on whole foods. There was a starch in any given area, whether it be tubers, potatoes, rice, bread, and then a whole lot of vegetables and beans. And animal products were usually, there weren't a lot of them, right? They were used for seasoning or for taste. So this longevity soup, I think, fits for many reasons, but I love it because you can make this, and this can be like, a lot of people come to the whole food plant-based because they're looking to shed some extra weight or looking to improve their heart health, which often includes getting off animal products and maybe losing some extra pounds. So this is a great one. If you make this soup, you can have just a cup of it before each meal. And effectively what you're doing is you're filling up on good foods, on really filling foods that are going to take up space in your stomach, so that when you go to eat your normal meal, you're not as hungry. I have a graph in the book talking about why we don't eat oil. And there's a picture in there because the calories in oil there are so many calories, but there's just such a small amount, right? Like a tablespoon of oil is equivalent to eating 50 olives. So if you ate 50 olives, that's going to take up a lot of space in your stomach. But that olive oil, with all the fiber removed, doesn't take up much space, but is super high calorie. So this soup is low calorie, but high nutrient density and filling, satiating, and you can make it really with all kinds of different things. So it's on page 42 of my book, but I will show you just how simple and easy it is. So I have a big pot here. Really all you need is a big pot. He says a can opener and a pair of scissors, because really with those things and like a hot plate or something, a stove, that's pretty much all you need. So the first thing's 2 cans of tomatoes. So it calls for a can of diced tomatoes and a can of crushed tomatoes. I actually have started buying this Tetra Pak tomatoes. You can often find them at a regular grocery store. You can find them. I love also what Jeff Novick does when he would speak with people about eating this way. He would often go to the dollar stores because people were very concerned that they didn't live near a Whole Foods, so they couldn't eat this way. And he would go to a dollar store and get the ingredients for this soup, because at a dollar store, usually you can find a grain, rice often. You can find beans or lentils, and you can find frozen or canned vegetables. So you could make this soup with everything from a dollar store if that's all you had near you. So I'm only using this Tetra Pak because its expiration is coming up soon. So I used one of these instead of 2 cans. But I went to the grocery store yesterday, and I got some organic fire roasted diced tomatoes and a no salt added. And these were like under $2. So this is a very economical recipe as well. If you're a college student or single, you can make this and freeze half of it if you want. So it's a super simple recipe. So it calls for 2 cans of beans, any beans you like. So I had some kidney beans and cannellini beans. I usually use organic if I can. These were on sale and they were like 98 cents or something. So that is basically red kidney beans and white kidney beans or cannellini beans. I rinsed those, drained them. If you are going to use the aquafaba, you can save that. So you can use that in some fun recipe. I'm going to grab the 2 bags of frozen veggies. So here's where it gets fun. You can use, again, whatever you have. You can use, I found a California blend. I don't know what makes it California. Broccoli, cauliflower, and carrots is what's in this. You can often find an Italian blend. So that usually has the addition of zucchini, I think is what makes it Italian. Sometimes red peppers. So this is a literal 1 pot. So you just dump everything in. So you want 2 pounds of veggies. Now, you can literally use anything you like. If you like just the carrots and peas, use carrots and peas. That wasn't 2 pounds, so I also had corn and peas. So I'm going to dump that in as well. And then you're going to add some starch. So this is what's going to keep us satiated and full. And this is also really fun because you can use whatever you like. So if you cooked up a whole bunch of potatoes earlier in the week and you have some to use up, you could just chop those up and use them. If you cooked up a whole bunch of rice and you had leftover rice, you could dump that in. It calls for 2 to 3 cups of cooked starch. You could use quinoa. You could use some other grain if you wanted. So those all you add cooked. Along with 7 cups of water. So I'm going to add part of the water here and then get a little more. The other thing you can do if you don't have cooked grains is you can add uncooked grains, so like a pasta. So I need 7 cups of water. I grabbed some pasta, and we typically just toss in some whole wheat elbows. If you're using whole wheat, make sure it is actually whole wheat, not, it can say other things. Don't believe anything it says on the front. They can really say anything they want. So you really want to go to the ingredients and make sure it's 100% whole wheat. But you can also find, these are elbows made of yellow peas. I have chickpea pasta, so you can experiment with all kinds of different things. But for the uncooked starch, it calls for 1/2 to 1 cup. So you just dump this in as well. I do about 3/4 cup. And that is basically it. I will show you what it looks like. So it's all just piled up in here. Now, what we're going to do is we're just going to put it on the stovetop, give it a stir, bring it to a boil, and then it needs to simmer for 15 minutes. So at this stage, you can, if you would like, add seasonings. But the trick that I love, Jeff Novick said, is he usually makes it like this, leaving the seasonings out. And then every day when he goes to have his lunch or his dinner, he'll pull out some of the soup and reheat it, and he adds his seasonings then. So one bowl could be, like an Italian bowl of soup. So he'll add Italian spices. And then maybe the next bowl of soup, he'll want more of a Mexican flavor. So he'll add, cumin and paprika. So there's lots of different ways to do it. So that's what I typically do now is I don't add seasoning. I do have a little of Tabitha's very good garlic. So that's just some garlic and onion and lemon peel. So I'm going to add a little bit of that. But I'm not going to season it with spices so that later we can add whatever we want. So I'm just going to stick this on the stove and get it boiling. Any questions about this super simple soup recipe?
I don't see anything more on the chat unless I'm missing something, but I don't think so.
Yeah, it really doesn't get much easier than opening packages.
Now, I know you're going to go to your delicious peanut balls, but before you do, explain what the fork. Tell us about that.
Yes. So for fork's sake, for
fork's sake,
yeah, it can be used.
Russellson that wanted to keep saying, what the fork?
Yes, exactly. It can be used in so many different ways. But the real idea, I loved the idea behind forks over knives, that the food we eat, you don't typically need a knife to be cutting it, right? You can just use a fork over a knife. So I loved that. And so it was a little tongue-in-cheek, the For Fork's Sake title. And when I surveyed friends and family, many people loved it. And some people were like, I will not buy the book if that's the title. So it makes me chuckle, and I just was trying to, have some fun with it. So
do you remember the quote that's in your book? And sometimes it's hard to bring them up verbatim, but that may have been attributed to Gandhi about the fork. Tell them.
Yes. How powerful the fork is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What's on the end of our fork is really one of the most powerful weapons we have.
There you go.
Yeah. And if you think about it, I mean, really 3 times a day, at least, right? We often snack, but 3 times a day, we have the opportunity to help or harm ourselves or the planet with what we're putting in our mouth. And I just think, I feel like eating is such and maybe kind of like the Gandhi, it's one of the biggest things we can do. It's like voting with our dollars. Where are we purchasing ingredients? Who's making these ingredients? Are we paying fair prices for them? Doing the T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies Food Systems and Sustainability course really opened my eyes to, in horrible ways, really, of just our food system. When we're buying inexpensive meat and cheese, that's not because meat and cheese is inexpensive. It's because our government is subsidizing those food products. And we have caves full of cheese, I just learned not long ago, in case we ever run out, even though, the government has to go to Pizza Hut and ask them to put a pound of cheese on pizza because they have a surplus. So I really do feel like in purchasing foods that are, whole foods that farmers are growing, is really voting with our dollars rather than, buying things, food products like you were talking about too. You're right. 14 years ago, we didn't have as many options. And in some way it was a good thing. We didn't have a bunch of fake sausages or, vegan patty kind of things or cheeses. Now, in some ways, that's great. It's bringing awareness to the fact that you don't have to eat animals and dairy. But I really suggest people maybe use those for transition foods at best and eventually move to eating whole food plant-based. And really, there's studies out now that say if you're eating a junk food vegan diet, so a lot of packaged, fake meats, fake cheeses, that kind of stuff, you have a worse health outcome than somebody eating the standard American diet. I mean, that was mind blowing to me. I thought it would be about the same, you know, or maybe a little better, but these products are loaded with oils, coconut oil, especially, which is really not good for us. Seed oils. Yeah, just food-like products. So, and I really do trust the biochemistry work of T. Colin Campbell in talking about when we extract things and run them through chemical processes and then put them back together, you know, that's like a soy protein isolate, you know, that's something that's taken a whole lot of work to do. Whereas, you know, tofu is just soybeans, right? You know, they're not, nothing's removed or added to that. I like Dr. Greger's definition of process being something is added or something is removed. So we try to avoid the processed vegan foods, but you know, if your only option at a restaurant is a Beyond Burger, an Impossible Burger, you can do that. Or you can just have a burger with no patty and just have all the fixings on it and enjoy that way. We've done that before too. So you will live for another meal that you can enjoy much more.
Okay, so let's see your peanut balls. They look delicious.
So, yeah, next up is the Happy Peanut Butter Balls. And I'll show you what they look like. This is them. So as you can see, they look different because I've used different, you don't have to make them out of peanut butter. In fact, we often don't so much anymore. We have, I'll show you the PB powder we have, but you can make them, I mean, these are all different. This is like a chocolate PB powder. This is a tahini. Then there's a sunflower butter. I think that's this one. So you can see there's different things in them. Some of them are rolled in chia seeds or cocoa nibs. Some have chocolate chips or goji berries. So you can use a variety of things. So similar to the Jeff Novick soup, you get to use what you like and what you have on hand to make them something that you would enjoy. So I know I just told you that we don't do a lot of processed foods per that definition of nothing added, nothing taken away. However, this PB2 powder we do, and this has had something taken away. This is peanut butter, like dehydrated dry peanut butter that has had the most of the fat taken away from it. So it's like 93, I think, % fat-free. So for us, because we have the APOE gene, that is, if we eat a lot of nuts, we see our blood work numbers change really rapidly. So, so that's something we're really careful with. So you know, we still enjoy peanut sauce on a Thai noodle dinner, and peanut butter balls and desserts with peanut butter. So this is one way you can do that if you're looking to lower fat or if you have high cholesterol. So, but other things, I mean, I do make them sometimes with tahini as well. That works really well. Almond butters, you can do that. I do have I'm out of it, but you can find this at almond butter, defatted almond butter as well. Sunflower seed spread, if people have nut allergies, you can use other things as well. So usually with this peanut butter powder, this is what it looks like. You, and I'm just gonna dump a bit in. Usually you mix some water with it. So it's just literally like a powder. But since I'm going to be adding liquid, I might add a little bit of water, but I'm going to just add the liquid. So initially when we made these were before we were even vegan, actually. We made these with honey, and I am not a diehard vegan. I am vegan for my health primarily. I love animals and I'm not buying any new leather, but when friends give us honey, that because they have bees, I will eat the honey. So, but I primarily don't buy a lot of honey these days. And so we use now date syrup as our sweetener. You can make this on your own. It really is just dates and water that have been blended together and cooked. So I've made it once or twice, but when you can buy it at Trader Joe's really easily, I tend to do that. You could also use agave. Some people sweeten with agave. You could use maple syrup as well. So basically for the amount of nut butter you have, however much you want, you use about half of the same amount of sweetener. So you just want to get a consistency that is, it's not runny. It's like a smooth kind of peanut butter. So I added that. I'm going to add a little bit of water. And really, this is a really fun one to do with kids or grandkids because they can do all the stirring and adding, and it's yummy things that they like. So, they can dip their finger in it if they want. And then these make really lovely things to put in lunches. We make these and stick them in the freezer, and you can pull them out for lunches or for snacks. Or we take them on long bike rides. They're great for a fuel source or long hikes. That's a good way to do it as well. So now I'm a little bit, see that? It's kind of like a runny brownie batter is what it looks like. And at this stage, then you start adding in, well, actually first, I'm going to add a little vanilla. Calls for a teaspoon. Again, these are all, I can't open my vanilla. These are all subject to how you like the taste of things. Okay, I'm gonna grab my vanilla powder because I can't open my vanilla. I had actually never used vanilla powder until recently. Chef AJ was the one talking about how she loved vanilla powder so much. So I found a little, it smells so good. So you can add vanilla if you like that. If you are not avoiding salt, you can add a pinch of salt. Especially if your nut butter doesn't have it. I would say with the one thing with the nut butters is, if you're eating this way, hopefully you've learned to always, always, always read ingredients. Nut butters are one thing that often will, they look fantastic. They say organic, smooth, whatever nut butter, and then you turn it around and it's got palm oil and coconut oil and a sweetener in it. So you just want, when you're looking for nut butters, you can make your own. You can get your own peanuts and, do it in your Vitamix if you want, or your NutriBullet. But just look for things that are just nut butter. If they add a little salt, that's okay. But you really just want nut butter. So at this stage, you're going to add some thickener. So this is oat flour. Super easy. You don't have to buy oat flour. You can just take your oats, just like the nuts, stick them in your Vitamix or your NutriBullet, grind them up, and you have oat flour. So I'm going to add some of that. I have some oat bran, and I have some regular rolled oats. So you can just, this is kind of like making Play-Doh or something. You can add to your liking, your consistency liking. Eventually we want them to be, so we can roll them up in our hands into little balls like I showed you. So you want them to stick together and hold together. So it's just kind of, messing around with what all, you could add, your chia seeds, you could put them inside. That'll hold them together. You can use some flax meal as well if you would like. So I'm just gonna add a little of the oat bran as well.
We have a question, Diana. Yep. And by the way, Lydia just loves the way the soup looks and the nut balls. Diana is, she says, I don't understand the problem with organic coconut oil. Why don't you address that?
Yeah, so for us, it's the highest, I believe it's the highest plant source of saturated fat. And we can't do saturated fats. Our cholesterol rises very easily, and none of us really want to be eating saturated fats. I mean, somebody pointed out at a talk I did at Santa Cruz Veg Fest that oats have some saturated fats in it. Now, I would say we're not extracting the saturated fats from oats and eating them in anything. We're eating them as they come, with all the fiber and everything nature put in them, and our bodies use that really well. Similarly, I would say if you're going to eat coconut, or if you like coconut oil, I would suggest eating the whole coconut, but not extracting just the oil from it to eat, because our bodies don't use it very well. It's also really highly inflammatory. So if you deal with arthritis or stiffness in your joints, you especially want to be avoiding oils.
Well, I'm going to read the additional chat. But it's the it's the saturated fat from God, isn't it? And I will address that and say, but the saturated fat from a cow is also saturated fat in that same way. And saturated fat, even though our body makes it and is necessary, saturated fat added to our diets has been shown in the case of a genetic mutation, which is what Rachel is referring to, hits their buttons big time and just skyrockets their cholesterol. I don't have that gene mutation, but by the same token, when I stopped putting any saturated fat from oils, from animals, if they're saturated fat in oats, it's minuscule and it's tied to the fiber of the oats, and that fiber, when it's tied to fats and we're eating a high fiber diet, a lot of it, some of it it gets pulled right through our digestive system attached to that. So that's my uh, explanation on that. Did you want to add something to that, Rachel?
Yes, I will. Just a second. My soup is boiling, so I'm gonna give it a stir
Good.
and then turn it down. I would say, for really great explanation on this, I would look up T. Colin Campbell, and or Caldwell Esselstyn. Dr. Esselstyn worked with patients who had severe heart disease to the point where they'd had surgeries or they were basically sent home to live out the rest of their days. And he was able to reverse people's heart issues by eliminating all oils, eliminating animal products, and especially caring for their endothelial cells, which he talks about eating a lot of greens for that reason. So I would look up Dr. Esselstyn or T. Colin Campbell's thoughts on oil, because they could probably explain a lot better. My simple definition is like, we don't put oil in our bodies for the same reason we don't pour bacon grease or oil down our pipes, right? We don't do it because we all know it clogs the pipes if we do that in our house. But I would argue that our pipes are the same and we don't need oil because it clogs our pipes.
Okay, Diane said thank you. She'll do some more research.
Yeah,
And
sure.
that was such a great question and such a accurate concern. So accurate as you related it. So thank you.
Well, my mom still asks me about oil because she loves olive oil, and her and many people's things. Second to protein, like where do you get your protein? And on page 5 of my book, I have a chart where we get our protein. So that's not one you have to worry about. But then often people say, but the Mediterranean diet has oil, right? And so understanding, like wrapping our head around, yes, they do have oil, but it might be despite the fact that they have oil, not because the fact that they have oil, that they have good heart health. They're eating a lot of whole foods in that diet as well. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. So show them what you're looking at so far.
So now I'm just grabbing a handful, and I don't use gloves because it's my house. If I was making these for you, I would wear gloves. But you just roll them into a little ball, and then I have here.
So you continued to add.
Yep.
Without measuring, you continued to add the solid, which was oat bran, oat flour, which is ground oatmeal, and some rolled oats until you got this consistency. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And like I said, you could toss in chia seeds if you wanted. You could use all sesame seeds if you wanted instead of oats. You could do that as well. And then, just roll it into a little ball. And then I have here cacao nibs, which are delicious if you're a chocolate fan like I am. So you can roll them in cacao. You can place a little chocolate chip or a cranberry, a goji berry on them. During the holidays with kids especially, it can be fun to take these. Now I'm kind of negating what I said about coconut. We don't do a ton of coconut anymore, but if you had shredded coconut, you can roll them in coconut and they look like little snowballs. So that can be a fun one for kids who are wanting to make a treat. So you just roll them up and then put whatever you would like in them or on them. And then you just stick them in a container and you place them in your freezer. I'm going to have to wash my hands. In your freezer or in the fridge, they'll set up a little bit. The freezer is perfect for lunches just because if you pull them out and stick them in your lunch, by the time you're ready to eat them, they are defrosted and nice and chewy. But we've been known to pull them out of the freezer if we just want some for dessert too. And, eat them kind of hard as well.
So there's a statement from Portobello Row, and she's quoting, I believe, Chef AJ and so many of us, uh, on the lips and on the hips and the endothelium. I think that's her saying on the hips, no, on the lips,
A
then on
moment on the lips,
the
lifetime on the hips. Is that?
and then on the endothelial. And
Yeah.
actually, that's one of the reasons that, because my weight has remained steady while I've been whole food plant based, and I can eat massive amounts of food. I'm really a volume eater. I can eat a lot. I like being full. I like eating enough to take me to the next meal without feeling that I even need to snack. And my weight stays steady unless I start getting oil in my food,
Mhm.
because I want the volume, but the oil adds hundreds and hundreds of calories that Barbara Roll in her volumetric studies have found. Our stomach doesn't register the fat the way it does the volume of fiber rich food. And so I find that if I don't have oil in everything I make, which could add to tablespoons and tablespoons a day, which would be pounds a month, then I can eat the volume I like and not even think about anything beyond that.
Yeah.
So that's part of why I don't bother with the oil. And I'm going to add one more thing to that, and that is the omega-6 and omega-3 situation. The omega-3 fatty acids and the omega-6. The omega-6, if you have too many, are inflammatory. The omega-3 are very anti-inflammatory, and the omega-3 are what are especially essential to keep at a 1-to-1, maybe at the worst 1-to-3, three being a ratio being the sixes to the threes. The standard American diet has gotten that ratio now so out of whack that it's omega-3s 1 and omega-6s, because they're in so many seed oils and in so many just regular foods. The ratio is now 1-to-20, 1-to-25, 1-to-30, which is a very inflammatory situation. So for all those reasons, a lot of us look at the oils and say, no, thank you. I'm fine without that. Whole food, plant-based all the way. Give me the olives instead of the olive oil.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I find that ratio really does, like you say, balance out once you cut out the oils and once you cut out fried foods, French fries, eating out at restaurants. That's a lot of omega-6s as well. And the fantastic thing, like you, I love eating, and I find sometimes when people come to me because they're wanting to lose weight, they're wanting to get healthier, the hardest thing for them to do is to learn that they can eat more, because they're used to restrictive diets that have taught them that they have to eat less. But going this way, you might need to be eating more than you were before, because calorie wise, you won't be eating as much food. And the other thing about the oils is you can make all your favorite foods that used to have a lot of oil. We make black bean brownies and sweet potato brownies, and we make cakes, and we make strawberry rhubarb breads and pumpkin breads and all these things, not with any oil. We use applesauce instead of oil, 1-to-1. If you go to my website and sign up, you'll get a free downloadable printable guide to cooking and baking without oil. I had never had an air fryer before, but during COVID, I decided I would try one. So we just have a little basket one, but you can make you can use your oven in the same way, but you can make French fries without oil. That tastes wonderful. They still have the same crunch and all of that. You can make tortilla chips using just plain corn tortillas that you cut up and bake in your oven. Put a little lime juice and some seasoning on them, and they're fantastic. So, once you lose that taste, and the other thing is you'll be able to identify when you eat a food that has oil in it. If you haven't been eating oil and then you take a bite of a muffin or a cookie, immediately you will know by that mouth feel that there's oil in it. So, yeah.
Tell you what, why don't you let them know how they can best find you and reach you? And I believe you even offer coaching.
I do. Yeah. www.forforksakebook.com is where you can find me. I do have a page on there if you're looking for some consulting or coaching. I speak with groups. I do all kinds of stuff, any way to help people get healthier and help the planet get healthier. I'm also on Instagram. I'm for Fork's Sake Book on Instagram, and on Facebook, I'm also for Fork's Sake Book. So those are the main areas you can find me. And I do have a paperback, a hardcover, an Audible, an audiobook, and an ebook. So you can get the book however you want. The audiobook is just under 4 hours. So I'm not joking when I said I wrote a really short and sweet book. I really wanted to give people the snippets, enough information to get going, but not hours and hours spent reading. So, and the other thing I like people to know is that I donate 50% of the profits from the sale of the book to charity, and 1% of my gross sales goes to 1% for the planet. So this really is my best effort at helping both people and the planet with their health. So yeah. Find me. I send out a weekly newsletter. So if anybody wants to sign up for that, it's a really short and sweet, like the book newsletter, with a tip or a recipe or something like that too. So,
well, this has just been delightful. And I think that we've all learned a lot. I'm so inspired to make the peanut balls. I have the ingredients for the soup, so I'm going to throw that together. It's always nice to have soup on hand. And does it freeze well? It's been frozen prior, some of the ingredients, but it freezes well.
It does.
If we make huge batches of it.
It does. And oftentimes, now that it's just my husband and I, we won't, we don't want to eat the same soup that long. So like 1 week is fine, but maybe not 2 weeks. So I'll usually freeze half of it. And then you can, like I was saying, season it however you want. When you pull it out, add sauces. There's nothing saying that you have to use frozen vegetables either. If you have a garden and you're, bursting at the seams with veggies, use whatever you have. That's fantastic too. But I like the simplicity that people can know, college students, if you don't have a big budget for food, you can do this really easily on canned or frozen veggies. Don't worry, you're not getting any less nutrient benefits that way. And if you want even more benefits, like we were talking for those endothelial cells, you can always add some fresh greens. So I only have 4 kale leaves left that I was going to add to our salad tonight, but you could chop up a whole head of kale or a bunch of spinach, toss that in as well, and get even more nutrition benefit out of this soup.
Okay. Well, we're going to let you all go. I appreciate those who are watching this. Thank you for contributing to the chat, everyone. I'm going to be saying goodbye, and Rachel, stay on for just a moment so that we can say goodbye. And I thank Rachel. I hope you enjoyed this. I certainly do. And you'll never look at a fork the same. It can be a weapon, or it can be your defining tool in bringing yourself to vibrant health. Have a great day, everyone. I know I'm going to. Bye.